Imagine walking into your favorite lunch spot, smelling the sizzling steak, and ordering a burrito packed with fresh ingredients, only to end up in a hospital bed fighting for your life. In late 2015, this was the reality for dozens of Chipotle customers. The brand, built on food with integrity, suddenly became synonymous with a multi-state biohazard. For years, Chipotle was the undisputed king of fast casual. They didn't just sell food, they sold a philosophy. While fast food rivals relied on frozen processed ingredients, Chipotle championed locally sourced produce and meat raised without antibiotics. It was a marketing masterclass that made consumers feel ethically responsible with every single bite. But in October 2015, that pristine image cracked wide open. It began in the Pacific Northwest, where health departments noticed an alarming spike in emergency room visits. Healthy young adults were presenting with severe abdominal cramps and bloody diarrhea. The terrifying common denominator? They had all recently eaten at Chipotle. The crisis rapidly expanded across 11 states. The CDC launched a massive investigation, identifying the culprit as Shiga toxin-producing Escherichia coli O26. This wasn't a simple stomachache, it was an aggressive pathogen capable of causing permanent kidney failure. Panic spread as dozens of locations abruptly shut down. How did a multi-billion-dollar empire built on freshness collapse into a public safety nightmare? Today, we are pulling back the foil to reveal how the obsession with fresh became Chipotle's ultimate undoing. Make sure to stay until the end of this video, where we will discuss the critical lessons learned from this catastrophe. Chipotle's biggest selling point was also its hidden fatal flaw, its massive, highly decentralized supply chain. To deliver on the promise of locally sourced ingredients, Chipotle didn't rely on a few massive, centralized industrial food processors. Instead, they bought from hundreds of small, independent local farms scattered across the country. In theory, this was a beautiful, sustainable dream. It supported local economies and cut down on the carbon emissions of shipping food coast to coast. In practice, it was a logistical and regulatory nightmare. Standard fast food giants like McDonald's or Wendy's maintained strict uniformity by processing almost everything in a few heavily monitored, highly automated factories before freezing it for transport. Chipotle bypassed that clinical industrial safety net entirely. They were shipping raw, unfrozen beef, whole heads of lettuce, and crates of unpasteurized jalapenos directly to individual store kitchens. This meant that every single local farm was a potential point of failure. If just one small farm in Washington state had a stray cow wander into a lettuce field, the entire system risked contamination. To make matters worse, Chipotle's rapid expansion was outstripping its ability to monitor these vendors. Between 2010 and 2015, the company grew at a breakneck pace, opening hundreds of new locations a year. Quality assurance teams were stretched razor-thin, scrambling to audit hundreds of disparate suppliers, each operating with varying levels of food safety protocols. When the E. coli outbreak hit, this decentralized web made tracing the source nearly impossible. Health officials asked Chipotle exactly where the contaminated ingredients came from, but because the supply lines were so fractured and localized, the company couldn't provide a clear answer. The very system built to guarantee absolute freshness had accidentally created a perfect, untraceable map for a pathogen. The supply chain was only the first half of the equation. The second breakdown happened right behind the counter. Part of Chipotle's magic was the open kitchen theater. Customers loved watching employees dice tomatoes, mash avocados, and shred pork right in front of them. It felt authentic, like a home kitchen scaled up to feed hundreds. But cooking for hundreds of thousands of people daily using home kitchen methods is an operational hazard. In a standard fast food restaurant, raw meats and fresh vegetables are physically separated by miles of highway and industrial processing plants. Lettuce arrives pre-washed and shredded in sealed plastic bags, while meat arrives in frozen, pre-formed patties. At Chipotle, however, raw steak, raw chicken, and raw produce met for the very first time on the exact same stainless steel prep tables in small, crowded backrooms. This setup created an environment ripe for cross-contamination. If an employee chopped raw chicken and then used the same knife or cutting board to slice lettuce without a flawless surgical sanitization process, the deadly bacteria from the meat would instantly transfer to the fresh veggies. Because the lettuce and tomatoes were served raw, there was no subsequent cooking process. no kill step, to eliminate the hitchhiking pathogens before they reached the customer. To execute this complex, high-risk culinary operation safely, Chipotle needed a workforce of highly trained, meticulous kitchen staff. Instead, they relied heavily on high-turnover, minimum-wage fast food workers who were being pushed to move faster and faster by corporate throughput metrics. In the race to keep lines moving out the door, meticulous sanitization protocols were bound to slip through the cracks. By November 2015, the crisis had breached the containment of the Pacific Northwest. New cases of E. coli poisoning were popping up in California, Ohio, New York, and Minnesota. The CDC was frantically trying to piece together the puzzle, but the pathogen was moving faster than the investigators. Chipotle's stock price began a terrifying, unrestricted freefall, wiping out billions of dollars in shareholder value in a matter of days. Instead of meeting the crisis with total transparency, Chipotle's initial public relations strategy was defensive. Corporate leadership tried to downplay the systemic nature of the issue, suggesting that the outbreak was isolated or that the media was blowing the situation out of proportion. This classic corporate denial alienated an already panicked public, transforming a food safety issue into a profound trust crisis. The breaking point arrived when Chipotle's founder and co-CEO appeared on national television to offer a public apology. While meant to reassure consumers, the corporate messaging felt calculated and rigid rather than genuinely remorseful. Meanwhile, local news stations across the country were running nightly segments featuring heartbreaking interviews with hospitalized college students, completely drowning out the company's carefully manicured PR narrative. Just when Chipotle's executive team thought the situation couldn't possibly get any worse, a second bomb detonated. In December 2015, while health inspectors were still combing through kitchens looking for the source of the E. coli, an entirely separate health crisis erupted on the other side of the country. In Boston, Massachusetts, over 140 Boston University students fell violently ill after eating at a single local Chipotle location. This wasn't E. coli. This was Norovirus, a notoriously contagious gastrointestinal bug that spreads like wildfire in crowded spaces. The culprit wasn't a contaminated farm or a broken supply chain this time. Instead, it was an explicit operational failure. A sick employee had been pressured to work a shift anyway, single-handedly contaminating the entire serving line. Almost overnight, the narrative shifted from an unfortunate agricultural fluke to a damning indictment of Chipotle's corporate workplace culture. To make matters even more catastrophic, public health records revealed yet a third ongoing crisis. A few months prior, a massive Salmonella outbreak across Minnesota had already been quietly traced back to contaminated tomatoes used in Chipotle's salsas. The brand was now being bombarded by three entirely distinct, highly dangerous pathogens all at the exact same time: E. coli in the west, Norovirus in the east, and Salmonella in the Midwest. The public realization was brutal. Chipotle's entire system was systematically unsafe. By early 2016, the cumulative weight of three independent outbreaks brought the fast casual giant to its knees. Chipotle was no longer just losing premium status, it was actively hemorrhaging its core customer base. The once ubiquitous lunch lines that snaked out the front doors vanished overnight, leaving behind empty dining rooms and anxious franchise managers staring at untouched stainless steel counters. Desperate to arrest the financial bleed and restore a shattered public trust, corporate leadership made an unprecedented high-stakes gamble. They announced that on February 8, 2016, every single one of Chipotle's more than 1,900 restaurants nationwide would completely shut down for the afternoon. This wasn't a partial closing, it was a total operational freeze to conduct a massive, simultaneous safety meeting for over 50,000 employees. During this historic shutdown, executives broadcast a live, closed-circuit presentation from corporate headquarters to every darkened dining room in America. They laid out strict new operating realities, reinforcing basic hygiene and introducing rigorous contamination checks. It was a staggering logistical feat that cost the company millions in single-day revenue, serving as a visceral admission that their previous system was completely incapable of keeping people safe. To salvage its reputation, Chipotle had to completely dismantle and rebuild its culinary identity. The company hired leading food safety experts to design a system that eliminated human error from the equation. The resulting changes radically transformed how ingredients were handled. effectively ending the era of raw, unpasteurized ingredients being prepped entirely from scratch inside individual restaurant kitchens. The biggest operational shift was the introduction of high-pressure processing, or HPP, using extreme water pressure to kill pathogens without heat. Ingredients highly susceptible to contamination, like beef, jalapenos, and tomatoes, were moved to centralized commissary kitchens. There, they were washed, diced, tested for pathogens, and vacuum-sealed before being shipped to stores. This shifted the most dangerous prep work out of the chaotic restaurant environment and into a controlled, sterile space. For items that stayed in the restaurants, like avocados and cilantro, Chipotle implemented rigorous new safety steps. Employees were required to submerge whole avocados in boiling water for exactly 5 seconds to kill any surface bacteria before cutting them open. Cilantro was subjected to a meticulous sanitization bath. The free-flowing, intuitive cooking theater of the past was replaced by a rigid, heavily timed scientific checklist. The scientific overhaul fixed the physical kitchens, but Chipotle's corporate culture was still broken. Founder Steve Ells was a visionary chef, but he wasn't a crisis manager. As sales continued to stagnate throughout 2016 and 2017, activist investors lost patience. They demanded a leader who valued rigid operational execution just as much as culinary philosophy, forcing a massive executive shakeup. In early 2018, Chipotle made a definitive move by hiring Brian Niccol, the former CEO of Taco Bell. To the food purists, this was a shocking betrayal, bringing in a leader from a legacy fast food chain to run a brand built on being the anti-fast food. But Niccol understood how to scale a business safely without sacrificing speed or efficiency, and he brought a cold, metrics-driven realism to the company. Niccol immediately relocated Chipotle's headquarters from Denver to Newport Beach, California, physically and symbolically cutting ties with the old way of doing things. He instituted strict new employee wellness policies, including paid sick leave, to ensure workers would never feel financially pressured to show up to work ill. Culture was no longer just about the sourcing of the pork. It was about the accountability of the people handling it. With a new leader at the helm and a completely re-engineered safety protocol, Chipotle faced its most grueling challenge yet: winning back the millions of consumers who had abandoned the brand. Trust is exceptionally hard to build, but incredibly easy to destroy. The company couldn't just tell people the food was safe, they had to fundamentally prove it while completely changing their public narrative. Niccol launched massive marketing campaigns that pivoted away from abstract ethical philosophies and focused directly on transparency. They introduced the For Real campaign, highlighting the actual raw ingredients used in their food while subtly assuring the public of their rigorous new safety standards. They also invested heavily in digital ordering, building secondary make lines in kitchens specifically to handle mobile orders, which kept the front lines moving safely. Slowly, the strategy began to pay off. By late 2019 and early 2020, Chipotle's sales didn't just stabilize, they began to hit record highs. The stock price skyrocketed, eventually surpassing its pre-crisis peak to reach unprecedented heights. Chipotle had pulled off one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in restaurant history, transforming from a public health cautionary tale back into a dominant Wall Street darling. By 2026, Chipotle has solidified its status as a resilient giant, operating thousands of locations and generating billions in revenue. The ghost of the 2015 crisis has largely been laid to rest in the minds of the general public, replaced by a reputation for digital convenience and consistent quality. Yet, the corporate DNA of the company remains fundamentally altered by the trauma of that fateful year. The Food with Integrity motto still guides the brand, but it is now heavily balanced by a culture of absolute compliance. The romantic notion of an unindustrialized food system has given way to a sophisticated, tech-driven operation. Chipotle proved that a fast-casual empire can recover from a catastrophic public health failure, but it requires a total willingness to abandon nostalgia in favor of hard scientific reality. Lessons learned. The Chipotle E. Coli crisis provides a masterclass in the hidden operational vulnerabilities of modern food systems, offering 3 critical takeaways for the restaurant industry. The paradox of freshness. Fresh and local do not automatically equal safe. Without centralized kill steps or pasteurization, every touchpoint in a decentralized supply chain introduces an exponential risk of bacterial contamination. Throughput cannot outpace culture. Forcing high turnover, minimum wage employees to work faster without providing comprehensive sick leave or rigorous ongoing training creates a dangerous environment where protocol breaks down under time pressure. Transparency beats defensive PR. In a public health crisis, attempting to minimize the issue or blame external forces alienates consumers. Lasting recovery only begins when corporate leadership accepts total accountability and implements transparent, sweeping systemic changes. The story of Chipotle's nightmare with fresh food shows us that sometimes the very things that make a brand successful can become its greatest vulnerabilities. It takes years to build a reputation, but only a single plate of contaminated food to tear it all down. If you found this deep dive informative and engaging, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss out on any of our future videos uncovering the fascinating stories behind the world's biggest brands. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you eat at Chipotle during the crisis? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.